What are the odds we would meet exactly here 2 days in a row? Have a good walk. Good morning, venters. Guys, last night I was watching coverage on different news stations of the Hurricane Milton debacle that was happening throughout Florida. And it was so interesting because a couple hours into it, I turned to CNN. I was going between different stations, and I turned to CNN, and all of a sudden I noticed Anderson Cooper's hair was dry. And they show the wind going through his hair, and it didn't even look like it was that windy, right? Now, there were different portions during the day where it looked like it was really rainy and like it was going to be a hellacious day, right? And I noticed Anderson kept trying to back up closer to the sea so that the water would come over the fence line and hit him in the back. I don't know if you guys noticed that, but I noticed that. And like I said, all of a sudden I'm watching, and I notice his hair's not wet. And I keep looking at the ground where all these people are walking, and like the ground looked partially dry in certain areas, and it looked like the water had barely come up. They show the football stadium or whatever that place was where the news crews and the different people that were there to help were all going to be staying, and it looked like the roof got tore off. And it was just weird because they were saying that the big problem with this hurricane wasn't necessarily going to be the wind as much as it was going to be this water surge. And so it just kind of happened that it looked like a relatively good outcome, not too bad like they had thought. As a matter of fact, it didn't even look like it ended up being as bad as Helene was, which is really weird because they kept describing it like it was going to be twice as bad as Helene. So again, am I happy that the news seemed like they were wrong in this one? Yes, this is one of those where we have to say, you know what? This ended up being a little bit of a nothing burger. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm sure there's a lot of houses and damage that occurred, and I'm sure there's some people that they're going to find that did lose their lives for whatever reason. But it definitely, I think we can all agree, it definitely turned out much better than we all kind of thought it was going to turn out. And there was a lot of people that I guess did end up riding out the storm, and I guess they got lucky. Nothing too bad happened. That's a real life situation where you're pressing your luck, but of course things worked out. Let me share a story about a place that did not work out. But a little backstory on me. When I was growing up, I showed you guys a different part of the neighborhood, a little north of here, where my mom and I and her boyfriend rented a home when I was 5 or 4 years old. And I believe I told you guys that my mom got beat up by that boyfriend, and I had to run to the neighbor's house at like 1 or 2 in the morning, knocking on the door, asking for help, not knowing if this guy was behind me, ready to just, destroy me. So it was really a scary situation. But luckily, the neighbors let me in, and we were able to, get police over to help my mom before she lost her life, thankfully. Why do I bring this up? Well, one of my neighbors and good friends when I was in kindergarten and first grade was another kid named Jesse, and Jesse's last name was Craig. So Jesse Craig was a friend of mine. Now, he's not really involved in the story other than his name, Jesse Craig. So today I'm watching a video, and let's go away from Hurricane Milton, and let's go to the previous hurricane that actually did a lot of damage, which was Hurricane Helene. there is a town outside of Asheville, North Carolina, where they really had a lot of destruction and a lot of peril. There's a town called Fairview, and a man named Jesse Craig recently had a situation where he found out that Craig Town, which is the name the locals give the town in Fairview, because Jesse Craig's family, starting with his grandpa 80 years ago, owned a bunch of houses in this little area they refer to as Craig Town. Now check this out. Jesse Craig lost 11 family members to Hurricane Helene. All the water, all the winds, all the debris floating around created a situation where his family and their homes were taken out by massive mudslides. So here's where I want you venters to use your imagination. How horrible would it be if in one fateful swoop you ended up losing 11 family members? That is an awful, awful story. And that's one of those things that this Jesse Craig guy has to kind of cope with. Now, unlike his family members that all lived in Fairview, apparently Jesse Craig did not live there. So he might have been one of these estranged family members, which it didn't say he was, but I think he was one of these family members that just wasn't as close as obviously the rest of the family that lived there by one another. So he might not be as sad as he would have been if he was super close to him, but then again, I could be completely wrong, and he might be very close to them. But in the video, he wasn't in tears or anything, so I'm assuming he was a family member that had been apart from them for a while. Either way, could you imagine the horrificness of losing that many family members? Oh my gosh, what a nightmare. This poor guy. But anyway, Jesse Craig, you are in our prayers. The Jesse Craig that I grew up with, by the way, was a fun little friend that I had for kindergarten and first grade. And we always thought it was cool that we both had the same first name, Jesse. We were both the gift. I think I told you guys Jesse means the gift. Here's your present. It's me again. Good morning. About this time 6 months ago, I would see that gal back there walk every single day. I haven't really seen her walk too much lately. So I'm going to have a hard time pronouncing this gentleman's name, and he's not much of a gentleman at all, but Nasira Montahidi of Oklahoma City recruited his younger brother-in-law. I believe his younger brother-in-law was only 17. Don't quote me on that. But these two were members of ISIS, and they plotted an election day terror plot. And this was pretty intricate. Number one, they're in Oklahoma City, so I believe that's where they planned this carnage. They had gotten so far that they had went ahead and gotten arrangements. Good morning. They had arrangements set up for all of their family members to be repatriated outside of the country. In other words, these guys were planning on taking out a lot of lives on election day, kind of as suicide bombers, or maybe they were going to shoot people and then be taken out or taken into arrest or taken under arrest. But either way, they were foiled by a combination of FBI or national or federal law enforcement combined with the local law enforcement there in Oklahoma City. And they were able to basically track down this guy's plans and stop him before he was able to do anything. Now, the reason this is good news is because obviously he was planning on doing something horrible. Otherwise, he wouldn't have arranged for all of his family members to be outside of the country. So this was going to be a plan that he was planning on executing. Luckily, we foiled it, but here's the scary thing. How many of these guys are out there around the country plotting these things as we speak? You would like to think that the FBI and the state officials around the country have things under control, but they're the first ones that'll tell you when we find the plot and we catch it in advance. We look great, we look like heroes, but nobody ever hears about it. But it's that one or two things every decade that they don't catch that ends up being the big problem or issue. So again, they found this guy. How many guys out there have they not found yet? That's the real scary issue. If you have any thoughts on this, or if you heard about this story as well, let me know. What's crazy is between Hurricane Helene and Hurricane Milton and all the other problems that we have in this country on the daily, a lot of these stories can kind of fall through the cracks. But this might have very much have been the most important story. So I'm glad that they caught this guy, and hopefully there's more people that they're keeping their eyes on, so that when election day does roll around, hopefully we don't have to stress too much about it. In case you're wondering, this Tahiti guy, Nasir Aman Tahiti, he came out of Dallas on a work visa. So he had left the Dallas area for Oklahoma City. They didn't mention if it was recently or a couple months or a couple years back. But either way, he had relocated out of Dallas into the Oklahoma City area. What's really weird about Oklahoma City is that's where my dad was living before he perished, before he went up to heaven. And then, like I said, the guy named Jesse Craig, that was the same name as a kid that I grew up with. So sometimes you have these weird markers in life that kind of lead you into different stories. And you can say, hey, I once knew a guy named Jesse Craig. Hey, I have family members in Oklahoma City, right? So it's a small world after all. Guys, I got to tell you a funny story now. This story had me cracking up, and it's not really a story national-wise or even local. It's just a story with me. I get calls every day, and I don't get one or two calls. I get close to 20 to sometimes 30 calls a day. And I know you're thinking, God, that sounds obsessive or excessive, excuse me. It is excessive. I get 25 to 30 phone calls a day from people that I believe are from Pakistan and India, or at least outside of the country. And they call me every day trying to get me to give them my Medicare numbers. And I try to explain to them, you got the wrong number. I'm not even retired. Quit calling me. But they refuse to stop calling me. So the other day I answer the phone, and it's a robocaller. It's literally a robotic voice. But as it's talking to me, I can hear people in the background, and I can hear fingers clicking on a keyboard. We've all heard that sound before, right? So I'm talking to this robocaller, and it says, hi, my name is Betty. How are you doing today? And I go, Betty the robot? Betty, you sound like a robot. And I'm not even joking. The next thing the robot voice said to me was, no, sometimes people mistake me for a robot, but I'm a real human being. And I just lost it and started laughing. And I hung up the phone thinking, okay, that was hilarious. I've never heard such a thing before. And in case you're wondering, Jesse, could this have been somebody with like a tracheotomy, where they have to put that thing up to their throat and vibrate it so that they can make noise and talk to people? It was not that. This was literally a robot, like a robocall. But I think it was one of these situations where whoever was controlling it could listen to you with their actual human ears and then type the words they wanted to speak. Why do I say this? People from India and Pakistan, when you're talking to them, they might tell you, hey, I'm Mark from down the street, but you can kind of tell by their accent that they're not from America. You know what I mean? You can tell that you're not talking to a Texan or a New Yorker or an Arizonan every time they call, no matter how localized their name and number seems like it is, right? And so I hang up with that call, laughing my butt off. But at the same time, I'm angry because when you're trying to focus on your work and you get nonstop phone calls, and I know some of you have gotten the same situation, It's frustrating. With some, you don't answer. With others, you block the call. With others, you beg them to take you off the list. Nothing seems to work. The calls just keep coming and they keep coming. So about 5 or 10 minutes after Robo Betty called, I get another call. I already know it's from another telemarketing office. I don't know if it's the exact same one. I think it's a slightly different one. But instead of saying hello, right when I hear them in the background, right when I pick up the phone, I go, oh my God, who is it now? Let me guess. Robert Jones from Florida, right? And he goes, no, sir, this is Chris Jackson from Texas. And then I start laughing again because he said it in such a peppy, cheerful way. And right as soon as I start laughing, this is no joke, the guy that said his name was Chris Jackson starts laughing with me. So all of a sudden, you've got these two people from, I'm assuming, 2 different countries, me and this guy, and we're both just laughing our ass off because he must make these calls every day. And for all I know, they take my number and hand it to their coworkers so they can call me. So imagine you're like, oh my God, not another one. And then instead of hanging up like they normally would, they end up kind of having fun with me back. And I can appreciate funny stuff. So it actually kind of made my day, believe it or not, because I had these 2 back-to-back calls that just made me laugh like crazy. And you guys got to remember, I'm old school, so I consider laughter to be the best medicine, you know? So this is what it did. It gave me an idea. And I went to the Google Play Store and I downloaded a phone recorder app. About 4 or 5 years ago, I had a situation where an employer didn't want to pay me a commission. And so I went to my local state board and I made a complaint stating, hey, I've been working at this company. They didn't want to pay me a commission, yada, yada, right? And so I had this situation where, to get proof that they were threatening me, because that's what my boss was doing, they were giving me threats like, hey, if you don't let go of this complaint, you know, we're going to have to probably look at going somewhere different in the future. You know, in other words, if you don't get rid of this complaint, we might have to let you go. Well, that's about as threatening as it gets. So I put this phone recorder app on my phone and I caught them saying some pretty damaging things. Nothing ever came of that, just in case you're wondering, but the point is I had this app on my phone. Fast forward a couple years and you know how it is. Sometimes you find out that your phone's breaking or the battery's not charging, and so it's not uncommon for us to go down and replace our phone, right? So you go to the T-Mobile store or the Verizon store and you buy yourself an upgraded phone, right? So the last upgraded phone that I purchased, I never put this app on because I never had a reason to record calls. But after I had these 2 absolutely hilarious telemarketing calls, and by the way, these weren't my first 2 ever hilarious calls. About 1 out of every 50 of these calls that I have with these people are pretty funny for whatever reason. A lot of times it's because they start cursing and they really are pranking. And I don't know if you guys remember when we were little kids and teenagers, but back then we didn't have cell phones that would tell you who's calling you. So a lot of times, a lot of us would prank call our friends, or we would call up to stores and we would prank call them. Do we do it now? No, because we all have cell phones that tell on us and who we're calling from, right? But back in the day we would. So I think we can all appreciate funny prank calls. So I ended up downloading this phone recorder app, and my game plan is if they call in the future and I have a funny call, I can go ahead and automatically record it. And Mala and Sean and Lily, I might be in the perfect situation to actually share some of those calls with you. And in case you're wondering, one of my skills from back in the day is I'm actually pretty good at doing prank calls myself. So these will actually be reverse prank calls. Now there's some other videos online where these scam callers will call in, and you'll see YouTubers try to get them to open up their computer screens, and they end up trying to infect the bad guy with a virus, or they try to steal all the stuff on the bad guy's computer, right? Meanwhile, the bad guy's trying to steal the YouTuber's identity and stuff, right? So it ends up being a pretty fun video. I don't get calls where scammers try to get me to open up my computer and share access with them. I get the scammers that call and they try to get me to sign up for some Medicare stuff, which again leads me to believe that they think that I'm probably one of my older family members or something, because I'm not old enough to retire, obviously. So I get these calls and it's just like, you know what? I'm going to record them. And if I get a funny one, I'm going to share it with you guys. And I'm not going to go out of my way to record and share everything. I'm just going to record that one out of, 30 or 50 calls where it's kind of funny and hilarious. A lot of times their accent is so strong that you can't even really make out what they're saying. So again, I'm just going to share that one in a blue moon that's just really too good not to share. My only regret is I didn't have this up so that I could share these earlier ones. Good morning. I've also decided to reach out to some YouTubers, because believe it or not, I didn't give up on the reaction side of my videos. I've just decided that to be safe, if I'm only allowed a certain amount of strikes per 90-day period, and every time somebody has a complaint on my video, it's always the same thing. A guy that has 45 seconds on a video ends up complaining for some reason at the harshest level, which really makes no sense, because I always tell people this is the original video, go visit this YouTuber, subscribe to their channel, go visit their stuff, yada yada. But either way, some people are just, they're gonna complain. So what I decided to do is, hey, we'll just do things the right way. So I started reaching out to a YouTuber here and a YouTuber there. Let's just see if we can get their permission. And instead of doing a reaction every single day, maybe the reaction could be a little bit more special, because maybe it could be once every, 5 or 6 days or once a week. So I reached out to a person or two to see if they would be okay if I went ahead and did a reaction to their video. And so that's my game plan going forth. I tried reaching out to one of my family members that's an attorney, but he kind of treated me like anything but a family member, if you know what I mean. It was one of those things where I asked him to review a video to see if I had any right to fight it with fair use, which I'm pretty sure I do. But he kind of blew me off. I had to reach out to him multiple times. And, you can kind of tell when a family member or a person in general is kind of blowing you off. You would like to think that your family members wouldn't do that to you. But I know what he's thinking. He's thinking, hey, I'm a lawyer and I have a family relative that wants free legal advice, and that's not really what I'm all about. That was the vibe that I got from it, right? And in reality, I was just like, hey, take a look at this. Tell me if I should fight this. And then if anything happens, I could choose to get, a copyright attorney or something to help me with this, or a fair use attorney. But either way, that's what happens with family members. They become estranged. And not that we're estranged by any means, we still talk and stuff, but they become separated. Have you ever had a situation where you're close to your immediate family, your aunts and uncles and stuff, but you're not necessarily close to their kids, which would be your cousins? That's kind of the situation I'm in. I have a lot of cousins from my mom's side of the family, but we're not necessarily close cousins where we're talking a lot. So when we do talk, it comes across as, yeah, we're related, but we're really kind of strangers to one another. I'm not a big fan of it, but at the same time, I was one of these guys that in my 20s and 30s, I missed a lot of the Thanksgiving and Christmas parties with these members of the family. So they've always viewed me as the kid that didn't really want to be part of the family, and I can't blame them. That's where I made a mistake in my young adulthood. And that's why I tell you guys, don't be like me. Don't be the guy that wakes up one day and says, hey, I want to reconnect with my dad. And then you find out, like me, that, oh my gosh, my dad died 5 years ago. I mean, that's pretty devastating. The reason I'm not in tears about it is because my whole life I only saw my dad like once or twice, literally my whole life. It's really hard to develop feelings for an individual that you never see. Speaking of feelings, I might owe Justin Bieber an apology. It looks like the more that I'm hearing about Diddy and all these parties that they have, and I'm sure you guys have heard this too, every time I hear a new something or another about this situation, it gets worse and worse and more heinous. Apparently what these guys did, and when I say these guys, I'm talking about Diddy and other people that were kind of high up in the entourage of his, it looks like what they did was they literally drugged people. Everything from the baby oil had a drug in it where when it applied to your skin, you started feeling the effects of this drug. They would put drops of, different drugs inside people's drinks. So all of a sudden you're drinking something, and all of a sudden you find yourself trying to run out of this house because you feel like you've been poisoned. And of course you wake up and your clothes are off and you're all slicked up with baby oil and your butthole hurts. Right? Not to joke, but I mean, that's the situation that happened. Well, if all of a sudden you're in this situation where you wake up and you just had, anal sex with a man, right? And you were the catcher, so to speak, and the man was the pitcher. And oh, by the way, we have it on video. Yeah, I could see how that would keep people quiet. I definitely could. So at the same time, should people have gone to these parties? No. But if people went there because they were starstruck and then they were drugged and then things happened to them while they were, wasted, I could see how that could happen to people, especially if they're not used to it, which I think we can all agree a 15-year-old Justin Bieber is probably not used to hardcore drugs running through his system. So again, these things can happen. That just goes to show you how evil some people can be. We are all going to have forks in the road where we have a choice to do something good and righteous, or we have the ability to do something kind of cold, heinous, and wrong. The question is, are you going to have the strength and the mental fortitude to try to pick the right route? Every one of us occasionally does the wrong move. Every one of us occasionally does the selfish mood. As much as we like to claim that other people are narcissists, I think if we were completely honest with ourselves, we would have to admit that sometimes the man or woman in the mirror is actually the narcissist as well. What we can do is we can make a decision going forward that when we come upon that fork in the road, we're going to start making the right decision and the right choice. And that, my friends, is why I walk. That is why you should walk as well. If you're new to me and you think, hey, this is a channel where Jesse likes to talk about current subjects, that's kind of about half true. The reality is, if you walk with me and we have fun talking while we do, not only will we stay up to date on what's going on around the country, but we can lose quite a bit of weight and get a lot healthier together. So if you're up for losing weight, talking about fun subjects and topics, and doing it all together as a team of venters, I'm with you every single day, and I hope you join me every single day. I'll see you tomorrow.